Night shifters, ever witnessed a paranormal activity? If so, what was it? I used to work at what was an abandoned prison. It had been sold by the government and bought by a private developer. The country I worked for rented the prison from the developer while they were going through planning stages. As the history dated back to the Georgian era, it soon became popular for paranormal groups to conduct ghost hunts. They would pay a fee to use the site, but someone from the company I worked for had to be present for fire safety. This wasn't my usual job, but we were a small team, so I was on the rota to do an overnight shift with a colleague as we had a large booking. We would start our shift at 6 p.m. and finish at around 4 a.m. I never believed in ghosts before this, but my colleague was sensitive to that sort of thing. On paper it was simple: greet the group, show them fire exits, sync up your radios, then go to the central building for the night where we would complete paperwork, watch films, play games within reason, whatever we wanted to stay awake while listening to our radio. The night went by pretty quickly as I got on well with my colleague, and before we knew it, it was 3 a.m. The site is very spooky at night, even if you know it well, but we stayed in the main building, which was offices. We said goodbye to the team as they left for the night, and we locked the main gate behind them. Now we had to do a walk of the grounds that would allow us to see which cell lights were on, then we would go inside, switch off the lights and lock up the building. Bear in mind that it is pitch black outside. My colleague and I decide that we will stay together for this. We walk into the main wing and head up the different landings to turn off the cell lights. A breeze would go through the wings due to the wing doors being left open, causing the metal cell doors to slam. We were used to this from day shifts, but it was pretty unnerving. We went through the site, turning off lights and locking up. This included the hanging room, the old padded cells, the wing where women and children would be incarcerated when the prison was in use. Some officers would refuse to work there on nights, and the kitchen, to name a few. At this time, it was past 4 a.m. on a Sunday morning. My colleague had her car, but was too tired to drive. I didn't drive and it was throwing out time, so a cab home would be impossible. We decided in advance that we would stay the night. This wasn't that unusual. As a small team, we worked very hard and would often end up sleeping on the site. We went up one of the modern blocks, built in the 2000s, in a carpeted room. We'd put a heater and brought some mattresses over from the cells that a production company had left behind for us. What I was aware of, but trying very hard not to think about, was that where we were sleeping is where executions were carried out prior to the construction of a purpose-built room. As it wasn't uncommon for us to sleep here, we had installed a bolt on the inside of the door. This meant during the daytime, no visitors could get into where we slept. It also meant no one could get in while we slept, as we locked it behind us. We then went into the room where our mattresses were. My colleague was absolutely exhausted and on heavy meds, so once she went horizontal, she was out like a light. I was exhausted, but was struggling to adjust to my location. Then I started to hear doors slamming on the floor below us. I muttered to myself that it was just the wind, although a breeze wouldn't shift those fire doors, and shortly before we had closed and locked all the doors. This carried on for maybe 15 minutes or so, then I heard, clear as crystal, the sound of footsteps in the corridor directly outside where we slept. I've never been so scared in all my life. I tried to wake my friend, but she was flat out. Then the doorknob to the room we slept in began to rattle. There was no one else in the building. We had counted them in and out, plus we locked the door to our sleep space. I was petrified at this point. I put in my headphones, played loud music and closed my eyes as tightly as I could. I woke up a few hours later due to sunlight coming through a nearby skylight. It was about 7 a.m. and there were no noises. I packed up my things and went to the front of the prison. Everything was calm. I ordered a cab home and slept soundly in my own bed. On my next shift, I told my boss that he couldn't pay me enough to do another overnight shift. I used to work at a billiards hall, and I would work evenings. The place closed at 2 a.m., but cleaning up took a long time, usually an hour or more. It was a 2-story building with 15 tables on the ground floor, a large staircase in the middle, and the second story having long row of another 10 tables. At the end of the row of tables upstairs in the corner, there was a small room used as a closet, though nobody ever went in there. It was just myself and my coworker Jerry that evening. Before the place was turned into a billiards hall, it was owned by a guy who made and sold fancy rugs, and his son ran the place. It turned out his son was in the Calaxian business and used the place as a hub for transporting Calaxian. One day, the owner was found dead, hanging from a noose pitched over the second-story balcony. His son disappeared. The rumor was that the son ran afoul of people in the Calaxian trade, and his father was killed as revenge, and the son was kidnapped and likely dead. The father's death was ruled a suicide, even though the son's disappearance obviously indicated foul play. One night, my boss asked Jerry and myself to clean out the closet on the second story. We had one of those powerful industrial-grade vacuums that you wheeled around, and it was extremely loud. We were swamped with customers the whole night, and we realized we wouldn't have time to clean out the closet until after we closed. A glance in the closet told me it would add another 15 to 20 minutes of cleaning up after closing, so neither my coworker or myself were happy about it. It was about 3 a.m. when we carried the clunky vacuum upstairs and started on the closet. Jerry was using the loud vacuum while I rummaged through the miscellaneous items stored in there, throwing the junk in the trash and setting aside anything worth keeping. The closet was basically just a tiny room with a door, with carpet inside. Even though we changed the light bulb, it still didn't work, so I figured the wire in the wall was probably severed. When the place was renovated and turned into a place for billiards, some walls were knocked down, and some of the wiring was redone because you had to run outlets to each pool table to power the table lights hanging overhead. You didn't want a bunch of cords lying around exposed to customers. For lighting the closet as we cleaned, we both used flashlights because it was pretty dark up there. After several minutes of pulling stuff out of the closet as the loud vacuum Jerry was using droned on, I got to an old wooden box sitting on the floor in the corner of the closet. There were latches on the box which you had to press down on both at the same time to open. I tucked the flashlight under my chin and opened it, and right when I opened it, over the loud drone of the vacuum, I heard a blood-curdling scream. It was the sound of a grown man screaming, a scream of terror, like a man being dragged off to his doom and thrashing about to try and slow down the inevitable. It lasted for about 2 seconds. I let go of the box lid and it fell back into place and snapped shut. I turned around to Jerry, who was crouched down behind me vacuuming. He had paused in his vacuuming and was looking up at me. I reached down and turned off the vacuum and asked him if he was the one who screamed. "No, I thought that was you. Where did that come from?" A look of concern washed over his face. He got up and we both stepped out of the small room and looked over the balcony at the entrance to the building down on the ground floor. Both of us realized that there was no way the scream had come from outside. We wouldn't be able to hear it. The entrance was a set of large thick double doors, and even if some weirdo had decided to lean against the doors and scream at the top of his lungs for whatever reason, with the shop vacuum running and us being all the way upstairs in the corner in another room, it just wasn't possible for us to notice that sound. The scream sounded like it came from right beside us in the room. It was like a man screaming, right? I asked, feeling uneasy. Jerry nodded, his eyes were both wide. "It happened right when I tried to open this box," I said, as I picked up the box and placed it outside of the closet where there was more light. I squeezed both latches on the box and opened it again. Inside the box was a large folded-up tarp, and below the tarp was a tied rope noose. It had to be the noose that the previous owner was found hanging from. The realization made me feel a little sick, and judging by his expression, Jerry felt the same way. I tossed the box back into the closet, and both of us decided to cut short our cleaning and call it a night. I think both of us being grown men and not believing in ghosts made us too embarrassed to ever bring it up again. The scream was so distinct, even with the loud vacuum being on. I don't believe in ghosts, but for some reason, that experience still really gave me the creeps. Not me, but my mum, who has worked in a care home for the past 30 years. She often talks of weird hot and cold spots appearing out of nowhere and phantom whistling throughout the building. There's also been occasions where she's heard people screaming for help, gone to the residents nearby, and they're all asleep. The freakiest story she told me, though, was one night when she was cleaning the toilets, oh the glamour, when she felt a presence next to her. She turned around to see a person's legs, brogues and cord trousers, clear as day. Her eyesight came level with the person's knees, and they just disappeared, like that. She was pretty shaken up after that. I've had several over the years. I spent the better part of 17 years working nights at various jobs. This experience spans a period of 5 or so years and transition from active duty military to civilian work for the military doing the same job. In early 2003, fresh to a military base, I was sent TAD, temporary assignment, to the base military police. Now mind you, I didn't go to school for MP, I was a fueler. 2 or 3 months into TAD, I was assigned a lone post for a remote gate overnight because there was training active and they needed immediate access in case of emergency. I was alone. It was maybe 1:30 a.m. The nearest houses were over a mile away. The post is sandwiched between two freeways and a road. Nothing else for a mile or so north or south, maybe 5 miles east-west. All of a sudden, I hear kids laughing and playing. Loud. Like they're within a few hundred feet or less. Fast forward an hour, and the road sergeant tries to sneak up on me from inside the base. Didn't work, but. He stops. I use the porto potty. I come back. He asks about the kids laughing, thinking it was me. I explain what I've heard. He spends the better part of an hour looping the freeway around us, thinking a car was broken down. Never finds anything. We hear the kids 2 or 3 more times but never find anything. Fast forward, late 2008 I take a position at military police again, this time as a civilian. A month or so into the job, some of the Marines are talking one day, either before or after shift. This little kid's ghost story pops up. One of the corporals had related to them, apparently to scare them. I immediately chimed in and said, that was me. Seems occasionally someone would hear them again. 2009, I'm out on a dirt road unlocking a gate, and the Marine I'm riding with says, those effing kids bro. It's like 3 a.m. We're 2 miles farther east into the base from that gate. Sure enough, middle of nowhere. Kids giggling. I was closing my restaurant one night. It was me and a delivery girl alone in the building. As I was working on my close-out paperwork, I heard loud sobbing start up in the bathroom. I went and knocked on the door and asked Maria if she was okay. Crying stopped but she didn't answer. I thought maybe I had embarrassed her, so I went back to the office. A few minutes later, the crying started again. Really loud wailing. She sounded like she was really going through something. I went back to the bathroom, unsure of what to do. I stood there for a few minutes before trying the door and finding it unlocked and the bathroom empty. I looked for Maria and couldn't find her. Called her to find out she had clocked out without telling me and left 30 minutes prior. I finished my close in record time and got the heck out. The next day, I told my boss about it, and he said he thought the empty land to the back of us had been a cemetery at one point. Worked at a small call center for insurance, so there were only about 6 other people doing night shift with me on the regular. One day, a slow day, it was just me and my other friend, we'll call her Bianca. Bianca got a call from someone reporting an accident, and the call went something like, "Hi, I've been in an accident. A semi-driver hit me. I think I'm okay. Everything just feels fuzzy." It was customary to ask time and location, and the time that the girl gave Bianca was a couple minutes into the future, so we just figured this girl was in shock, but took down the time she started anyways. She got the girl's name, call her Amy, and finished a report. Bianca told me about her phone call and in the middle of it, I get a call. A semi-driver, reporting an accident. Same exact location as the previous caller, time was the same, but at this point, had happened a few minutes ago, so the time was logical. And get this. Paramedics had already arrived on scene and pronounced the girl that the semi-driver hit as Doa, dead on arrival, and the ID found in her wallet had her name as Amy.